This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. If a man were to be called to fix the period in the history of the world during which the condition of the human race was the most happy and prosperous, he would, without hesitation, name that which elapsed from the death of Domitian to the ascension of Commodus. That is what the 18th century historian Edward Gibbon wrote about this period, and it's clear that his views have shaped how Commodus is viewed by the general public today. He was the first Roman emperor born into the purple. That is to say, born when his father, Marcus Aurelius, was already emperor, and it would prove disastrous. Marcus Aurelius's intention had been to train Commodus for the imperial throne, but the young man seems to have paid little attention to his lessons. Instead, he was interested only in seeking his own pleasure. And once Commodus inherited the crown, he became extremely paranoid. He lived in constant fear for his life. Early life. Born Lucius Aurelius Commodus on the 31st of August 161 AD in Lanuvium, together with his twin brother Aurelius Fluvius Antoninus. Commodus was named after his father's adoptive brother, Lucius Saonius Commodus. As an imperial prince and the heir apparent, Marcus Aurelius would have assembled the best possible teachers for young Commodus. It's clear that Marcus intended Commodus to succeed him from an early point. In 172 AD, when Commodus was only 11 years old, he got the title of Germanicus, together with his father, for Marcus Aurelius's victory in the Marcomannic Wars. Commodus was, of course, way too young to have actually earned the title, but he was probably present at the front with his father at the time. In fact, he seems to have gone back and forth between Rome and the frontier, where his father spent much of Commodus's early life. Various unfavourable criticisms of Commodus's character as a boy are retailed in Historia Augusta. The faults criticised are described mostly in a general way, and the specific habits listed are not particularly discreditable. An interest in pottery making, dancing, singing, and whistling might in certain circumstances be regarded as positively commendable. An early fondness for vulgar jokes and for performing as a gladiator may have been unfortunate tastes, but not necessarily disastrous. One detailed story is given of a piece of boyish fury at the age of 11. He ordered a bathkeeper, who had let the bath at Centum Cellae, a city on the Etrurian coast a few miles north of Rome, go lukewarm, to be thrown into the furnace. The slave to whom the order was given burned a sheepskin instead. After all, the order was not carried out, and was probably only shouted out in a tantrum. Still, the contrast with the grave 11-year-old Marcus Aurelius, who tried to live the philosopher's life, is very striking. In 175 AD, Avidius Cassius attempted a coup d'etat because of false rumours about Marcus Aurelius's death. Commodus was once again summoned from Rome to his father at the Pannonian frontier to keep him safe. But before he set off, it seems like Commodus, together with the prefect of the city, made some benefactions and celebrated Commodus's forthcoming assumption of the toga virilis to calm the panic in Rome that Cassius's revolt had caused. Commodus left for the frontier on the 19th of May 175 AD, and on the 7th of July he celebrated his assumption of the toga virilis on the Danube frontier with his father. Upon donning the toga virilis, a Roman boy became a man and a full Roman citizen. The Eastern Tour. Avidius Cassius's rebellion is blamed on Commodus's mother, Faustina, who apparently sent a letter to Cassius, worried about Marcus's health and that he would die at any moment. She was afraid that the empire would fall to someone else, as Commodus was young and rather naive, and that she would be reduced to a private station. Therefore, she secretly persuaded Cassius to make his preparations so that, if anything would happen to Marcus Aurelius, he might take over both her and the empire. Commodus was to accompany his father to the east and deal with the usurper, who had not responded to Marcus's peace offers. However, just as they set off, news arrived of Avidius Cassius's death. He had been assassinated by one of his own centurions. The rebellion lasted only 3 months. To show magnanimity and leniency, Marcus burnt Cassius's letters before looking at them, preferring to turn a blind eye to those who had been involved. Marcus did not want a witch hunt in Rome, but to create stability. This is the sort of man Commodus's father was. A military campaign against Cassius was no longer necessary, but Marcus still needed to reaffirm control of the areas that joined the revolt. So Commodus accompanied his father from the Danubian frontier into Thrace, crossing over in the straits to Bithynia, then into central Anatolia. In Cilicia, Commodus's mother, Faustina, died. Her involvement in the revolt was either not known to Marcus, or it was ignored. Perhaps because he burned those letters, he never found out. The imperial retinue continued into Syria, where they pacified the recently rebellious province. From there, they travelled through Palestine into Egypt to secure the grain supply to Rome. Before heading back to the capital, they stopped in Athens, where both Commodus and Marcus were initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. Now a word from our sponsor. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service that offers thousands of documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. CuriosityStream is the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. CuriosityStream is also extremely affordable at under $20 a year. That's just $1.67 per month. I've been watching a series on megacities from the ancient world, and they have some amazing reconstructions that I can watch all day. They have a full episode on Rome, Alexandria, and Athens. I can also recommend the documentary, Pompeii, Disaster Street. It details the excavations that started there in the summer of 2018. Curiosity is the entertainment brand for people who want to know more. CuriosityStream is the world's first streaming service addressing our lifelong quest to learn, explore, and understand. Available on many platforms: web app, Roku, Android, Xbox One, Smart TVs, iOS, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Amazon Kindle, and Apple TV, available worldwide. Content spans science, nature, history, technology, music, and sports. CuriosityStream adds new shows every week. Go to curiositystream.com/SPQR for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and non-fiction series. And for our fans, use promo code SPQR and you will save 25% off, which comes out to only $14.99 a year. So click the link below or go to curiositystream.com/SPQR and save 25% right now. That is only $14.99 for the whole year. That's just $1.25 per month. Thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the video. The young Augustus. Commodus and Marcus returned to Rome in the autumn of 176 AD. On the 27th of November of that year, Commodus was granted Imperium and the title of Augustus, making him co-ruler with his father. But Marcus was undoubtedly the superior of the two. On the 23rd of December, they celebrated a joint triumph over the Marcomanni and their allies. On that same day, Commodus was granted the tribunician power. A few days later, on the 1st of January 177 AD, he was consul, at the age of only 15, the youngest Roman consul so far. With equal powers as his father, it was clear to all Commodus would be the next sole emperor if and when Marcus Aurelius died. In the summer of the following year, 178, Commodus married Brutia Crispina. The actual ceremony was modest, but was commemorated on coinage, and largesse was distributed to the people. This marriage was, like most marriages of young Roman nobles, arranged by their fathers. It's reported that Commodus greatly disliked his new wife. Crispina is described as being a graceful person with a susceptible heart. Upon her marriage, she was granted the title of Augusta. In that same year of 178, Commodus accompanied his father once more to the Danubian frontier, where Marcus would pass away on the 17th of March of 180 AD. On his deathbed, he had once more recommended his son to his friends and generals with the following advice. "Here is my son, who you yourself brought up, who has just reached the age of adolescence and stands in need of guides through the tempest and storm of life. You who are many must be fathers to him in place of me alone. You must give my son the sort of advice and remind him of what he is hearing now. In this way, you will provide yourselves and everyone else with an excellent emperor. And will you be showing your gratitude to my memory in the best of all ways? Indeed, it is the only way you can keep my memory alive forever. Herodian." Sole Reign. My father has gone up to heaven, and now sits as a companion of the gods. We must concern ourselves with human affairs, and govern the world. As Commodus had all the necessary titles and powers of an emperor already, his ascension to sole rule was quick. His first decision as sole ruler of the Roman Empire was to abandon his father's plan to expand the empire upon the completion of the war. He made peace with the Marcomanni and the Quadi, after a quick expedition across the Danube to show force. The Danube was to remain the frontier of the empire. Marcus Aurelius had feared that Commodus would not complete the war. When he began to grow ill, he summoned his son and besought him first of all not to think lightly of what remained of the war, lest he seem a traitor to the state. The Historia Augusta, admittedly an unreliable source in the best of cases, relishes in the opportunity to emphasize how Commodus submitted to the enemy's terms in order to quickly return to Rome, where he could enjoy the many luxuries of the capital. An alternative view is that the Antonine Plague was still ravaging the Roman world, and the Northern War was expensive. Manpower dropped dramatically following the plague, and with increased military expenditure in the Northern Wars, and less tax due to the many casualties of the epidemic, the wars might have proven unsustainable for Rome. Commodus was only 19 years old when he assumed sole control of the empire, and he lacked military experience. He could not afford to lose a major expedition in the north. Instead, he signed a peace treaty with the Marcomanni and the Quadi. Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus was one of Marcus Aurelius's most trusted advisors and generals. He is said to have opposed Commodus's decision, but to no avail. Pompeianus was part of the imperial family. He was married to Commodus's sister Lucilla, the widow of Lucius Verus, and as such, he had the strongest claim to the throne after Commodus. Before we judge Commodus too harshly for abandoning his father's wishes, we have to evaluate the result of this settlement with the tribes. Considering no serious threat was reported from that area for the next 60 years, it seems that it worked. And with a treaty beneficial to Rome, Commodus could style himself as a bringer of peace. The tribes across the Danube were probably exhausted after many years of war against Rome. To secure his position, he left the frontier and headed for Rome. As he drew nearer to Rome, the whole Senate and population of the city was so anxious to be the first to see their new, noble emperor that they could not restrain themselves from coming out quite a distance from the city to meet him. Herodian. Upon entering the city, Commodus celebrated a triumph for the Germanian victory, and early on in his reign, he showed moderation and even magnanimity. Avidius Cassius's former ab epistulis Latinis had been captured, a man named Manilius, though not, it seems, at the behest of Commodus, as his pursuers acted out of enthusiasm for Commodus, but without his authority or approval. When Manilius was brought before Commodus, as Cassius Dio reports, the emperor would not listen to a word from him, though he offered a great deal of information, and he burned all the conspirators' papers without reading them. This was, of course, very popular among the Senate. No doubt a few of them were likely linked to the conspiracy. Lucilla's plot. Sometime after Commodus had returned to the city of Rome, probably towards the end of 181 AD, the exact date cannot be determined, a plot against the emperor's life came to light. Much of the detail is shrouded in mystery. All our sources give different explanations. Perhaps, as Herodian records, Lucilla was jealous of Commodus's wife, Crispina, whose position was superior to her own as the wife of the emperor. The Historia Augusta claims that Lucilla was motivated because Commodus desired to destroy the Senate. Dio, however, claims that Lucilla complained to her lover, a certain Numidius Quadratus, and together they convinced a member of the Senate, a man named Pompeianus Quintianus, not to be confused with Lucilla's husband, Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus, to strike down Commodus. Quintianus hid in the shadows of the entrance to the Flavian amphitheatre, drew his dagger, and sprang out at Commodus shouting, "See, this is what the Senate sends you!" Unfortunately for the conspirators, by stating what he was about to do, Quintianus not only gave away the plot, but also allowed the emperor's bodyguards time to overcome him. Commodus's response to this plot against his life was initially very reasonable. Lucilla was banished to the island of Capri. Quintianus and the reported lover of Lucilla, Numidius Quadratus, together with 3 other senators, were executed. Her husband, the venerable Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus, was forced to retire from public life and withdrew from Rome to his estates in the countryside. However, to make matters more confusing, one of the 2 praetorian prefects, Tarucinus Paternus, seems to have been involved in some way. However, not in the initial stages of the conspiracy, but later on, for he took the investigation of the plot into his own hands, but was later stripped of his prefecture and put on trial for charges of complicity in the conspiracy and attempting to prevent proper punishment of the guilty. He had probably tried to shield his co-conspirators. Following Paternus's trial, further executions followed. Many of Marcus Aurelius's friends were executed, especially senators who had held high command in the Marcomannic Wars were done away with, because they likely posed the greatest threat to his reign. Aftermath. The conspiracy seems to have made Commodus extremely mistrustful of the Senate and downright paranoid. He relied on 2 prominent advisors, mainly Tigidius Perennis, the other praetorian prefect who gained a much stronger position after Paternus's removal, and Aurelius Cleander, a freedman of Greek origin who served as Cubicularius. That was the title for a sort of chamberlain position in the imperial court. Commodus withdrew almost entirely from public life, and the Historia Augusta describes stories of extreme debauchery, some of which are likely exaggerated. But what is clear is that the relationship between the emperor and the Senate was completely destroyed. He surrounded himself with freedmen, and not a single senator was part of the Concilium Principes, the imperial council. Early on in Commodus's reign, Tigidius Perennis is described as almost omnipotent, governing the empire, while Commodus indulged himself at his every whim. Commodus also had some wars with the barbarians beyond Dacia, in which Albinus and Niger, who later fought against the Emperor Severus, won fame. But the greatest struggle was the one with the Britons. In 184 AD, a massive uprising in Britain was put down by Ulpius Marcellus, and Commodus was granted the title of Britannicus as a result. However, upon the completion of the campaign, 3 legions in Britain were in a rebellious mood. Perhaps because they were refused a donative after their victory, or because of Marcellus's harsh treatment of them. They even tried to raise an imperial usurper, who, however, refused. Perennis sent new legates to the legions to restore their discipline. The rebellious troops figured it must be Perennis's fault that their grievances weren't satisfied, so they sent 1,500 javelin men to Rome. These men came near Rome without any resistance, and were met by the emperor. They accused Perennis of plotting against Commodus, arguing that Perennis had tried to take advantage of the rebellious mood in the legions in Britain to secure a power base there, with the end goal of usurping the throne from Commodus. Perennis had also persuaded Commodus to give the command of the Illyrian armies to his sons, even though they were still young men. So perhaps Perennis was planning a coup d'etat and was securing a power base. Either way, his plan failed, and he was summarily executed. In 185 to 186 AD, there was a war carried out against deserters of the Roman army, who had started plundering and robbing townships in Gaul and Hispania, the so-called bellum desertorum. This suggests that there was general discontent in the ranks of the army in the mid-180s AD. A man named Maternus had deserted a Roman legion and surrounded himself with brigands and other deserters. It's even suggested that he wanted to depose Commodus, and that he tried to kill Commodus by disguising himself as a Praetorian guard and kill the emperor during the festival of the Mother of the Gods. The plan failed because some of Maternus's men betrayed him, out of jealousy and at the prospect of having a robber chief as emperor. The Dagger. With Perennis removed, Aurelius Cleander, Commodus's other prominent advisor, proceeded to concentrate power in his own hands and to enrich himself by becoming responsible for all public offices. He sold and bestowed entry to the Roman Senate, army commands, governorships, and increasingly, even the suffect consulships. This would eventually culminate in 190 AD, when there were 25 consuls in 1 year. As a result, the Senate was flooded with new members during Commodus, perhaps to diminish its prestige. And this is how Commodus used to open his letters to the Senate. The Emperor, Caesar, Lucius, Aelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Pius, Felix, Sarmaticus, Germanicus, Maximus, Britannicus, pacifier of the whole world, invincible, the Roman Hercules, Pontifex Maximus, holder of the tribunician authority for the 18th time, Imperator for the 8th time, consul for the 7th time, father of his country, to consuls, praetors, tribunes, and the fortunate Comedian Senate, greeting. Dio Cassius records a gladiatorial event where Commodus fought himself. Having killed an ostrich and cut off its head, he came up to where we were sitting, holding the head in his left hand, and in his right hand raising aloft his bloody sword. And though he spoke not a word, yet he wagged his head with a grin, indicating that he would treat us in the same way. Even though the senators found this display amusing rather than threatening, they had to swallow their laughter out of fear. Many would indeed have perished by the sword on the spot for laughing at him, for it was laughter rather than indignation that overcame us. Dio Cassius. This harsh relationship with the Senate would have been something of a shock. The senators had been used to good relations with the princeps, as of now. Both Commodus's father, Marcus Aurelius, and his predecessor, Antoninus Pius, had excellent relations with the Senate and consulted them regularly. And as Commodus often depicted himself in the guise of Hercules, and to fight as a gladiator, he alienated nobiles of Rome. However, senators were still given almost all honorific positions, but positions relevant to the rule of the empire were given to those who were directly dependent on the emperor. Pertinax unmasked a conspiracy by two enemies of Cleander, Anticistius Burrus, one of Commodus's brothers-in-law, and Arrius Antoninus. As a result, Commodus appeared even more rarely in public, preferring to live on his estates and leaving the ruling of the state in Cleander's hands. It's reported that Aurelius Cleander changed the Praetorian prefects regularly after Perennis's fall from grace. In fact, Perennis's immediate successor held the office only 6 hours, likely to diminish the power of that office. Inscriptions found in Rome give Cleander the title of Pugioin, the Dagger, directly responsible for the protection of the emperor. As a freedman, Cleander was placed right under the emperor, but outside the senatorial cursus honorum, which engendered a great deal of scorn and jealousy among the traditional elites in the Senate, and his disgraceful behaviour towards that body certainly didn't help. In 190 AD there was a famine in Rome organised by Papirius Dionysius, the Praefectus Annoni, the prefect responsible for the provisions, perhaps motivated by a demotion by Cleander. The people of Rome certainly held Cleander responsible, as the masses in the Circus Maximus were provoked to march to Commodus's villa outside of Rome, invoking many blessings on him, Commodus, and many curses on Cleander. Pertinax, who was the urban prefect at the time, was likely involved in the conspiracy to have Cleander removed, as the urban cohorts did not intervene. Herodian suggests that Cleander might have had imperial ambitions. If he first caused a shortage of supplies and then won people over by generous distributions when they were desperately in need, he would gradually gain the loyalty of the people and the soldiers. Herodian. Cleander's soldiers tried to deter the mob. Commodus was shocked by the idea of a revolt in Rome itself and didn't want to lose popular support, so he ordered the execution of Cleander. Colonia Commodiana. With the fall of Cleander, Commodus did not put forth a replacement for his position. Instead, he decided to secure his own power by winning over the people of Rome and the armies respectively. In pronouncements and iconography, Commodus always stressed his unique status as a source of godlike power, often depicted as Hercules. And if Commodus was Hercules, he was the son of Jupiter, the supreme god. He emphasized his own personal uniqueness as the bringer of a new order, seeking to recast the empire in his own image. A massive fire broke out in Rome in 191 AD, which burned buildings along the Via Sacra, including the Temple of Peace, the Temple of Vesta, and the fire reached as far as the Imperial Palace on the Palatine Hill. The Historia Augusta blames the fire on Commodus, but the reference to Nero's Great Fire is too obvious to take the passage seriously. Commodus saw this as an opportunity and declared himself the new Romulus, and ritually refounded Rome, renaming the city Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana. Armies and fleets were also renamed to honour their demigod emperor. The 12 months were also renamed after his 12 names: Amazonius, Invictus, Felix, Pius, Lucius, Aelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Hercules, Romanus, Exuperatorius. Dio recounts, for he himself assumed these several titles at different times, but Amazonius and Exuperatorius he applied constantly to himself to indicate that in every respect he surpassed absolutely all mankind superlatively. So superlatively mad had the abandoned wretch become. It was voted that his age should be named the Golden Age, and that this should be recorded in all the records, without exception. The Secutor. Commodus is described as being physically strong, and that he enjoyed sports like chariot racing. Though he was eager to play the charioteer in public too, he was ashamed to be seen doing so. But in private, he was constantly doing it, adopting the green uniform. He used to compete as a gladiator, and as Dio writes, in doing this at home he managed to kill a man now and then, and in making close passes with others, as if trying to clip off a bit of their hair, he sliced off the noses of some, the ears of others, and sundry features of still others. But in public, he refrained from using steel and shedding human blood. Commodus appeared as a gladiator over 700 times. He fought against professional gladiators, as well as wild beasts. Herodian wrote, in his gladiatorial combats he defeated his opponents with ease, and he did no more than wound them, since they all submitted to him, but only because they knew he was the emperor, not because he was truly a gladiator. Spectators of Commodus thought it unbecoming of an emperor to take up arms in the amphitheatre for sport, when he could be campaigning against barbarians, among other opponents of Rome. During the plebeian games of 192 AD, Commodus killed 100 bears all by himself, shooting down at them from the railing of the balustrade. On the other days he descended to the arena from his place above, and cut down all the domestic animals that approached him, and some also that were led up to him, or were brought before him in nets. He also killed a tiger, a hippopotamus, and an elephant. Having performed these exploits, he would retire, but later, after lunch, would fight as a gladiator. But of the populace in general, many did not enter the amphitheatre at all, and others departed after merely glancing inside, partly from shame at what was going on, partly also from fear, inasmuch as a report spread abroad that he would want to shoot a few of the spectators in imitation of Hercules. This story was believed too, because he had once got together all the men in the city who had lost their feet as the result of disease or some accident, and then, after fastening about their knees some likeness of serpents' bodies, and giving them sponges to throw instead of stones, had killed them with blows of a club, pretending that they were giants. Dio Cassius. He even replaced the head of the colossal statue right outside the Flavian amphitheatre with his own face, and put a lion at the feet, and gave it a club, so as to look like Hercules. The final conspiracy. Towards the end of 192 AD, it seems that Commodus wanted to kill both of the consuls of 193, Erucius Clarus and Sussius Falco, and, as Dio records, to issue forth both as consul and secutor from the quarters of the gladiators. In fact, he had the first cell there, as if he were one of them. That is to say, he would kill the two consuls of the year, assume the consulship himself, dressed as a gladiator, which was seen as incredibly disgraceful. Commodus planned a bloody charade on the 1st of January 193 AD, which would be an ultimate break with senatorial tradition and place him far beyond anyone else. So, in fear of the emperor's intentions, Clarus and Falco made Marcia, Commodus's mistress, their confidant. Herodian reports that Commodus had written an order to execute Marcia, and the praetorian prefect Latus, and the chamberlain Eclectus, whose names he had scribbled on a writing tablet, and presumably a number of other prominent people in Rome. This tablet was found by Marcia after a small boy, a favourite of Commodus's, had taken it up to play with. During the New Year's Eve festivities, they, Eclectus, Latus, and Marcia, tried to have the emperor poisoned, but his excessive use of wine made him throw up the poison. So they sent in one of Commodus's wrestling partners by the name of Narcissus, who strangled him. Commodus died on the 31st of December, 192 AD. Final thoughts. Commodus was 31 years old when he died. He had ruled the empire for 12 years and 9 months. He didn't have any children. It's fair to say that Commodus was megalomaniacal towards the end, changing the name of the city and the army after himself. He was ill-fitted to rule an empire, and he is remembered as one of the worst Roman emperors. His misrule ended 84 years of stability and prosperity within the Roman Empire. With Commodus dead, the Senate got busy erasing him from history. The changes Commodus made to the name of Rome, its institutions and its calendar, were reversed. What's more, mentions of his name, for example, where it was inscribed on temples, were erased, and any statues of Commodus were destroyed or thrown in the Tiber. And Commodus was declared an enemy of Rome by the Senate. Such was the end of Commodus, and with him the line of the genuine Aurelii ceased to rule. Dio Cassius. Thank you for watching the video. Remember to check out Curiosity Stream in the links below, and to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of our future uploads. The next video in this series will be on Commodus' successor, Pertinax.